Greetings, friends. Gemini Brett here. Spending a little time on this Saturday to have a look at a chart, and I figured why not do this live? So I'll set this up by just letting you know why I'm looking at this particular chart. And the answer is I'm dreaming into a plan to bring my nephew, Kyle, to a football game in Seattle. He loves the Seattle Seahawks, as I do, having lived there for many years, including the year in which the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl. And I go in and out of sports fanaticism, but I'm pretty in, especially in regards to Seattle Seahawks football right now. So, of course, I'd rather arrive and witness a game in which the team wins, given that I'll be spending a bunch of money I don't have to get there and get Kyle there and get a hotel room and tickets for a game and those things, right? So it's interesting. Sports in general is a really interesting way to practice astrology because there's a yes or no outcome, right? There's a win or a loss outcome to a sporting event. And some have, for this reason, chosen to practice like horary astrology, the astrology of divination on games, right? Will the home team win? And you cast the chart and it says yes or no. And if it says they win and they lose, you did it wrong, right? Now, many would caution, I'm probably one of them, that you do not want to invoke the oracle without deep, heartfelt, soul-aligned intent. And that, in my opinion, does not suggest that we cannot practice astrology with sporting events, because, for me, practice development in any way possible, it is a beautiful, heart-centered, soul-aligned intention, right? I'm not really a practitioner of horary astrology. I'm interested in it. It kind of plays with my general worldview. But I am looking at natal charts and transits to them to explore, well, might this be the day of a win or the day of a loss? Now, when you're doing this with a football team, you might do it with the football team's chart. That itself is kind of a tricky deal. The Seattle Seahawks were an expansion team in 1976. I was born in 75 when actually it became known that a team would be created in Seattle. They did not have a name yet, I believe, by the time I was born in October of 75. But they did have an ownership group, which was Nordstrom. And that same year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers became an expansion team in the National Football League. So there's a game in early October of this year, which is the month of my birth, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Seattle and will play the Seattle Seahawks at Lumen Field. And so I have my eye on that. Now, I'm not going to go into this transit analysis today. I just want to look at one birth chart, and specifically for the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, who is Mike MacDonald. So far, I've only looked at, and I haven't spent much time at the charts of the head coach, Mike MacDonald, and also of the quarterback, who's the new quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, Sam Darnold. A tricky thing with a football team is, all right, maybe you'll use the chart for the organization, but when is the chart for the organization, right? Is it the moment that was said the franchise will, the Seattle will have a expansion franchise in 1975? Is it when they were named? Is it their first game? Right? It's kind of a tricky thing to do. So what many have chosen instead when looking at transits for determining win or loss in a sporting event for a football team, where looking at every chart in the team would be somewhat ridiculous because there's 53 players and a whole staff of coaches and other folks that work for the team, general manager on down, that it tends to be head coach and quarterback, which it can be argued is the most important position in any team sport. So I was just taking a quick look at Mike MacDonald and Sam Darnold, and it was so quick that I really didn't get to the transits of October of 2025 when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will travel to Seattle, because it was just like, wait, how is this? Like, how is this the chart for this coach, or this the chart for this quarterback? And it really gives me an opportunity, and I hope this happens for you as well, pause of, well, this chart really doesn't look like what I would expect for it to. And then that's, on one level, challenging to my own astrological, paradigm. But it also then just opens the door for, hey, why does this work like this? And I've been surprised in that way many, many times over. And anyone who's willing to test their theories or test their learnings or test the code that we often take for granted has also experienced this to be entirely true, right? Well, for both of these charts, for Mike MacDonald, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, and Sam Darnold, the new quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, we don't have birth times. So, of course, that also makes things tricky. Let me get Coach MacDonald's chart on the screen for you. And I'd love to hear in the comments thread, for any of you that are here live, what you may see. Now, I should just let you know that, again, we don't know the birth time for Coach Mike MacDonald, which is why you see here T ? That's what I usually do if I don't know the time, whether for a client or somebody I don't know, like Mike. I will typically, when time is not known, cast a 12 p.m. chart, because of course that's going to give me the midday positions of the planets, right? If indeed Mike was born on June 26, 1987 in near Boston, Massachusetts, as the Wikipedia page suggests, then I can see that the sun was in Cancer and Venus was in Gemini. Now, of course, the moon is the one of these beings that moves most quickly. So I really don't know that Mike's moon is at 9.25 degrees Cancer, right? But I can say that Mike's moon is in Cancer, because if I just go 12 hours before to when June 26 began, in the weird way that we work with clock time these days, we're going to see that the moon's in a much earlier degree of Cancer, right before the new moon. And then here we are at 12 p.m. and then here's 12 a.m. the following day, and the moon's still in the sign of Cancer, right? So sometimes where we're looking at a chart for which we do not have a birth time, the moon might change signs. Or other planets might change signs. That's not the case at the time of Mike MacDonald's birth. So we can at least have confidence in the planets in the signs, right? Of course, I have zero confidence in his rising sign. So what I've done is just cast a 12 p.m. chart. This is, of course, not an astronomical expression of 12 p.m. where the midday sun would be up here above the ground, right? I've just cast a 0 Aries wheel, because why even try to work with houses if I have no idea what time he was born? Good question here. Do any of you play with houses and when you don't have a birth time? Maybe we can rectify a birth time by considering, where would a head coach in regards to the houses have a sun or a moon? What would the rising sign be that most makes sense for this being? We get into pretty tricky territory when we play that game, right? And I always love to say, like, because I'm such a fan of relocation, like Aries was rising somewhere at the time of Mike MacDonald's birth, right? So anyway, I'm going to approach this from a houseless point of view and just consider some things between signs of planets and the aspects between the planets. I'm going to check in. So Winter says of this chart, nurturing and possibly rooted in tradition. So we're hearing Cancer in that, and I think Saturn. We'll test that when we go back to the chart. But also a quest to break through antiquated practices. I think we're hearing Uranus or Aquarius there. We shall see. And then, oh, did you say you don't have a birth time? I did. So maybe some of the tradition also was looking at this idea that the sun and the moon are down in the fourth house. Well, they're not, right? Because again, we don't know what time this man was born. I was going to bring this into a class that I recently led in Constellations, the School of Astrology's membership group, because because we were speaking about the nodes, and Mike MacDonald was hired to be the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, and it's his first head coaching job in the National Football League. It's actually his first head coaching job in football, I believe. Mike, the year before and the year before that, was the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, who had the number one defense in the National Football League that year. And generally speaking, there's head coach, and then there's the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, who run the offense and the defense respectively. Somebody who runs what's called special teams. I don't want to like bring too much football jargon to astrologers, right? Because many of you won't be too interested in that trip anyway. But you know, it's a very high up position. And in a sense, Mike, for the Seahawks, though Aiden Durde is the defensive coordinator, Mike's calling all the defensive plays. So in a way, he's kind of running dual work as the head coach and also the defensive coordinator. So obviously, this is a huge deal for this man. He actually, at the time of this hire, he took the helm from Pete Carroll, who at that time was the oldest head coach in the National Football League, and Mike became the youngest head coach in the National Football League. He wasn't the youngest ever head coach of the National Football League, but he was the youngest at that time. As you can see here in January of 2024, he had not yet turned 37 years of age. He was 36 years old and got a head coach job for one of the 32, teams in the biggest football league that ever was. Like a pretty amazing step for a rather young person at the time. And interestingly, Pete Carroll was 72, was, twice Mike's years. And for those of you who have studied nodes and eclipses with me, you know that there's an 18-year eclipse period, the Sero series, that I'm always fascinated in as kind of what I call the opening of a nodal return. So you can see here that the North Node at the time of Mike MacDonald's hire was in Aries, as it was in the time of Mike's birth, right? And I'm interested in kind of exploring Mike MacDonald's prenatal eclipse, because I have seen again and again that when eclipse families come around, significant life cycle activations occur. And that's an 18-year cycle, or 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. So that's part of this time of his hire, significant advancement. This year was also the year that Mike MacDonald became a father. So obviously a very significant year for him. And, maybe fatherhood, something we would go first and foremost to when we look at the devotion to the Cancer mysteries at the time of this soul's entrance, right? Yeah, Isabel, you need me to tell them that you have strong Cancer in your chart. Isabel has a Cancer moon. I don't know if you heard the dog, but she wanted to get in on it then. She's like, I have a Cancer moon like Mike. Isabel has an Aries Mars. And you might expect something like that in an athlete. Well, what do you expect in a coach? And I'll just share that Mike MacDonald is known as a defensive mastermind. One of the ways that Mike's defense is seen as innovative and unique is through what are called disguised coverages, right? So what does that mean? When the offense comes up to hike the football and start the play, the defense gives you a different look than the type of defense they're actually going to play. And without discussing deep football strategy, I can't say it much more than that, but let me just say it more generally. There's a subterfuge here. There's a confusion. There's a disguise. So where might we see that in this chart? And where might we, so Haiti, I see that you wrote that you have a stellium in the fourth house too. Importantly, this is not a stellium in the fourth house. We don't know the houses. We don't know the time. So I just cast a 0 Aries chart wheel. The tendency to utilize house transmission has to be put aside if we don't know a birth time. Now I could put a sunrise chart and we could look from the sun. I could do a moonrise chart. We can do the node at the ascendant. There's lots of different ways that we can analyze a particular time on the day of this person's birth. But I'm not doing that here. I just want to take like a signs and aspects and analysis. And I want to be careful with aspects like the moon conjunct the sun, or the moon opposite the sun or Neptune, because moon moves very quickly, right? So again, 12 hours before when this calendar day began in Massachusetts, the moon's at 3 degrees Cancer, and 12 hours after noon on the clock, the moon's at 15 Cancer. And there I'd like really emphasize this moon Mercury conjunction, which I feel like makes sense for some of this the illusion of putting a defense out there, and then just as the quarterback on the opposing offense is about to hike the ball, everybody moves into a whole different look, and they prepared for something that actually isn't happening in front of them, right? So for me, that's a mercurial thing. Certainly shape-shifting. It's a Neptunian thing, right? Like we should probably see Neptune in the charts of gifted magicians, and I would say that's very much a magic. What about athletics in general? We probably look to Mars by sign, maybe looking towards Aries. What about defense? Right, so defense is trying to stop the other team from scoring, right? And interestingly in football, like to stop them from moving at all, to create a wall, right? You shall not pass, Gandalf style. Well, so what stops, right? We can do signs if you wish. What planet says, no, stop, you're not moving past this line? And I'm going to wait for you all to answer this one, because I'm sure we're going to get the same word. Or maybe I'm not, because mama and baby are coming home soon. Saturn, right? Thank you, Haiti, for that. And pardon me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly as well. Yeah, Saturn says stop. So if somebody is known for the defensive genius, I'm going to expect some type of strong Saturn. All right, so let's just be there for a bit. How is Saturn strong in this chart? I believe Saturn is strong because Venus is opposite Saturn. Now, that wouldn't, however, to me, speak of strong defensive mind. I would maybe expect Mercury and Saturn to have some kind of configuration. And they do their quincunx, retrograde Mercury and retrograde Saturn here, but in the tradition, I like to start there. Quincunxes weren't seen as an aspect at all. I would not be surprised if Saturn was angular at the time of Mike MacDonald's birth, if Saturn was culminating. I mean, for me, that would actually be quite interesting if Sagittarius was the midheaven, let's say 15 degrees Sagittarius or something. Actually, let me just show you a chart. Let's play that game. Just so I'd rather like show a thing than just say a thing. So here's 12 p.m., right? And now, of course, we're going to see the sun up high. It's, midday. But let's bring Saturn up to the midheaven. And I'm going to do that actually by rewinding time. Well, it's 12 a.m. or really late night. So I'm still on that calendar date of Mike MacDonald's birth, which is June 26, 1987. I'm going to choose this chart. Well, this one works really well, and what I would kind of expect to see in this moment's time, what could make head coach. And actually, I prefer the Aquarius ascension here. There's something about that innovation, strong Uranus, sextile the ascendant, Saturn, the kind of defensive energy culminated in strong. He's also the authority figure. He's the head coach of what? Of sports, right? So Saturn in Sagittarius at the midheaven, I go look to Jupiter. Here's Jupiter in Aries, a very athletic sign, right? Scorpio at the top of the chart, I go look for Mars. And here's Mars. Oh, let's just go 5 minutes further in the 5th house of games, right? But as I said before, we should probably be careful with that kind of stuff. For me, that makes all the sense in the world. I will say there was a chart that I rectified without a time in this way. I shouldn't call that a rectification at all. There's a chart where I felt like, for this person, Aquarius Mars rising makes a ton of sense. Well, I'll just say it was for Elon Musk. We don't know his birth time, or we didn't, and supposedly now we do. And I was like, look, this guy's trying to send rockets to space. How about that Aquarius Mars rising? And that's actually not how I was what I was looking at in Elon Musk's birth time. I was trying to kind of strengthen the aspect between a Mercury moon and a Virgo moon and a Cancer Mercury, who are in mutual reception at the time of Elon Musk's birth. And that happened to put Aquarius Mars rising in South Africa, where he was born. Well, it turns out that's not his birth time. It's not his rising sign. But in the birth time for Elon Musk in California, where SpaceX was born, Aquarius Mars was rising. So it's one of the reasons that I want to be careful of just like rectifying a chart based upon, like Saturn at the midheaven, I feel like makes a ton of sense for somebody who's kind of a defensive philosopher. Sagittarius, Saturn at the midheaven, defensive mastermind. Sagittarius midheaven with Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, 5 signs awake, it's 5 games in play, right? I could see all that totally working. Well, what if that's how it looked in Seattle, where Mike MacDonald got his first head coaching job, not in Boston, where he was born? Do you see what I'm saying? We just kind of need to be careful with that stuff. So if, again, I just go entirely houseless, the reason why I just wanted to start playing in that way is feels like strong Saturn, and I don't know that this is a strong Saturn chart. It is a strong Mercury chart, which doesn't surprise me at all. Why would I call this Mercury strong? Many would say when Mercury's retrograde and under the beams of the sun, right? I almost said combust, but combustion, according to the tradition, is a planet within 8.5 degrees of the sun. And here Mercury is more than 9. Mercury's retrograde and therefore passing the Earth by. And I see that as strong Mercury. Neptune is very strong in this chart. There's this grand cross of Sun, Neptune, maybe Moon, and the nodes. And that doesn't surprise me at all, right? Because that Neptune piece is going to offer the gift of delusion, confusion, illusion, right? Sometimes, of course, that's not a gift. Sometimes we feel that very far from a gift, right? Hey, it's here like Moon at home. You have Moon in Cancer. And that was true for that entire calendar day. And yeah, we want our coaches to be nurturers. I think Mike MacDonald does that in a very different way than Pete Carroll, the previous coach for the Seahawks, does. But I think he's got that. It might be a bit of like a tougher love. And it's interesting to consider Mars in Cancer there too, right? Anyway, look at like Mars square Jupiter. It's a really strong aspect in this chart. How might that play out? Look at Venus opposite Neptune. How might that play out, right? When we're stuck analyzing a chart and we don't have a birth time, so we really can't play with houses, we're left with planets and signs and planets and aspects. Now, planets and aspects, according to which aspect theory? There's two things I want to do, and then I have to run, and I called this Mike MacDonald part 1 because I really intend to get back to this. I might actually let this one go and do part 1 again because there's a bunch of time that I spent trying to set this up. So one thing just to share again, here we are when Mike MacDonald's hired, we're getting close to a nodal return. Let me share the screen in a different way so I can bring you over to my favorite eclipse sandbox online, which is moonblink.info. All right, because I can go and show you that Mike MacDonald's prenatal eclipse, which was a few months before his birth, right? He's born at new moon. This is actually the furthest thing from an eclipse. This is a new moon at the bendings. This is the moon very far north of the sun, so high above the sun in northern hemisphere skies like Boston, all right? But let me go back before Mike's birth, and we'll push this any eclipse button in the astrology software. This is Astro Gold software, and I'm seeing a partial lunar eclipse in Libra with Jupiter at the ascendant, Mercury at the equinox point, and some other interesting things. I'm going to rewind to the prenatal solar eclipse a couple weeks before. And where are you, Lilith? We're getting an annular or ring of fire solar eclipse in Aries conjunct Jupiter. Right now, if I just saw that, I'm like, oh, this is some like athlete. You know what I mean? Especially check out how Mars was rising where he was born at the time of his prenatal solar eclipse in Aries, right? Still get this kind of Pisces Mercury. Look at Neptune, Pluto with Mercury. I'm really intrigued in this eclipse chart because there's some things in Mike MacDonald's gift that I actually hear in this song. Now, all eclipses belong to families, so moonblinkinfo/eclipse/search, and I type in 1987, and I can see that this actually not even partial lunar eclipse, but penumbral lunar eclipse, which really doesn't look like anything but a full moon, frankly, was visible in Massachusetts where Mike was born, rewinding to actually isn't an annular solar eclipse alone, but a hybrid where some places on Earth saw annularity, ring of fire, and some places saw totality. That's in this blue bit here. It was seen in Africa over here. But you'll see that it's member 50 of 80 eclipses. And so I'm really interested in when that particular family of eclipses, Saros Series 129, comes around again. And the answer is before we turn 18. sometimes after, depending on how close you are born to your prenatal eclipse, and then next before we turn 36. So here's this eclipse on April 20th, 2023, where Mike MacDonald is hired. January 31st, 2024. And I don't have time right now to explore these charts, but I'll tell you, like, that chart interests me very much. Well, let me at least just put it on the screen so I can just rewind to the prenatal eclipse here. It's prenatal solar eclipse. And then I'm going to add 18 years twice. Let me actually do it once first. So here's the prenatal eclipse. 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours later, there's going to be an eclipse at 19 Aries. So that was here in 2005. 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours later, there's going to be an eclipse at 30 Aries, or 0 Taurus. Let's find out. 2950 Aries. Right? And it's close to Mike's Jupiter. It's during a Jupiter return. Jupiter is squaring his natal Mars, just as natal Jupiter squares the Mars. Mars is transiting. It's an interesting chart in lots of different ways. And so maybe this is something to do on my own time, or maybe I'll share this live when I have the time. I'm really interested in exploring these eclipse activations for Mike MacDonald because there's something about the time in which he was hired. And for those of you in Constellations where we've been talking about the nodes, I just noticed as well that Sam Darnold, the new quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, he was hired by the Seahawks during a nodal reversal, and Mike during a nodal return. Intriguing. All right. Well, I might not limit my research of this moment of time through traditional aspect theory alone, where we see again like this grand cross in the cardinal signs. We use these nodes in Neptune along with the sun. The strong square between Mars and Jupiter. There's many other things to see. The strong opposition between Venus and Saturn. Right, Mercury heading back to retrograde. He'll in this retrograde period oppose Neptune 3 times, trine Pluto a few times. Like, all these things are just interesting pieces of data for me. But I wonder if we see strong 7th harmonic aspects at the time of Mike MacDonald's birth. Why do I wonder that? Because 7s tend to be innovative. And so we see like Uranus in a biseptile, 2/7 of the wheel away from the north node. That's interesting. The south node connected with Chiron through 7th harmonic aspects. Pluto and Mercury. And it's actually not. It's Pluto and Mars. Well, I'm intrigued by that. But it's not as strong of a 7th harmonic aspect chart as I might otherwise expect to see. But this is why we have the gift of harmonic charts. So if I go look at this 7th harmonic chart for Mike MacDonald's birth moment, now I can see that Jupiter and Saturn are almost precisely opposite in the 7th harmonic chart. Well, that means they're conjunct, by the way, in a 14th harmonic chart. I can see this trine here between Mercury and Neptune, which I find actually quite profound. That Mars with Pluto are in the midst of that figure. The 6s, hexagons, sextiles, trines are in this family. They can often come through community, team, that type of trip, right? And again, like Mercury, Neptune, I feel like it's a way that Mike MacDonald's gift shows up. This kind of ability to disguise and this genius and this innovation, if you will. I might expect to see Uranus in very innovative charts, and here's Uranus node in the 7th harmonic, which we saw just in the septile between Uranus and the node in the natal chart, as we saw Chiron in the node in another direction. But there might be another harmonic that is louder for Mike MacDonald, and I would expect the fifth. So I haven't looked at this yet. But yeah, there's a lot of quintiles, biquintiles. The stronger the geometry, the thicker the line. Why would I expect fifth? Because fifth tends towards creativity and art. Now, when I say art, we tend to think paintbrushes and canvas hanging in galleries, right? But what I mean by art is creativity. And this man is really known for his creativity in a world football that isn't necessarily considered to be something artistic, right? So let me just show his fifth harmonic chart, and then I'll take it up from here another time, I hope. Well, I know, I'm just not sure whether or not I'll do that live. And by the way, if you're hearing this in real time or later, please leave in the comments if you're interested in exploring things like astrology and football and astrology of football coaches. All right. So let me cast a fifth harmonic chart for Mike MacDonald's birth moment. And I'm just going to make that my only chart as we will end here. Yeah, intriguingly, we see another grand cross, and a really strong grand cross. Venus, Jupiter, Neptune with the nodes. All right, so the 20th harmonic chart, why did I say that? Because 5 and the square is 4 is going to be really strong here. It's going to show like a Venus node Neptune conjunction, which for me, 20 is manifesting our creativity. I'm looking at this Jupiter trine Pluto, which is super strong here, right? So conjunction, the 15th harmonic is what that means. I'm also looking at Sun, Mars. The square is like a little bit less strong, but definitely there. So, and what about Venus in Taurus and Mercury in Virgo? Well, many say we shouldn't pay attention to signs in harmonic charts. I do. I think there's a strong reason that we should. Actually, they do in India, though they're using divisional charts in a very different way than Western harmonic astrologers do and are. And speaking of signs, what about Mars in fall and Cancer in the natal chart? So it's just interesting things to consider, because look, if I want to, for example, base my decision on whether or not I'm going to spend money I don't have and can't afford to bring my nephew to a football game, I would prefer for it to be a win. And if I'm going to try to understand whether or not there's more of a chance for a win because there's favorable transits to the head coach's natal chart, I need to know who that head coach is. So all of you understand that a Jupiter transit does not work the same for everyone, right? It depends on the one. So anyway, thanks for spending some time with me today. Nadine, thanks for saying that you love Sportstrology. I know you're into sports and very much into astrology as well. So yeah, please, the rest of you, if you like the video, if you like spending some time like this and looking at charts together, give it a like, leave a comment, inspire me to do more of it. I might just need a little help from the team. See you in space, friends.